Wait, this story is not just for love. Watch the end and like, share, and subscribe, please.
The boardroom was silent before Adrian Kim even walked in. Glass walls. City lights below. 12 executives seated, waiting. The door opened. Adrian stepped in, calm, precise, untouchable. No wasted movement. No unnecessary words. Everyone stood. "Sit," he said quietly. They obeyed instantly. A presentation flickered on the screen. Numbers. Profits. Growth. One board member cleared his throat. "There's a risk in the Singapore deal." Adrian didn't even look at him. "Then remove the risk." The man hesitated. "It's not that simple." Adrian finally looked up. Cold. Direct. "It is," he said. "You're just not capable enough to see how." Silence. No one argued. No one ever did. Because Adrian didn't make mistakes. He controlled outcomes. He controlled people. He controlled everything. The meeting ended in exactly 12 minutes. Perfect. Efficient. Flawless. As he walked out, his assistant followed. "Your schedule is clear after 7 p.m., sir." Adrian paused for half a second. Then continued walking. There was only one thing he never planned for. His voice was almost a whisper. Her. And that was the day control began to slip. Morning light slipped gently through the thin curtains of Lena's small apartment, painting soft golden lines across the worn wooden floor. The city outside was already awake, cars passing, distant voices, but inside, everything felt calm, almost untouched by the rush of the world. Lena stood in the tiny kitchen, carefully pouring tea into two mismatched cups. Her younger sibling, Sammy, sat at the table, still half asleep, scrolling lazily on his phone. "You're going to be late again," Lena said with a small smile, sliding a cup toward him. Sammy groaned. "I swear, one day I'll be rich and never wake up early again." Lena laughed softly, shaking her head. "If being rich means losing sleep and peace, I don't want it." She said it lightly, but she meant every word. Lena's life was simple, almost invisible in a city that worshipped power and money. She worked long hours at a small community center, helping people who had nowhere else to go. Some days it was food, some days it was advice, and sometimes it was just listening. She never complained. To her, kindness wasn't something extra, it was everything. Later that morning, she walked through the busy streets, greeting familiar faces along the way. An old shopkeeper waved. A little girl ran up and hugged her tightly. "You promised you'd come today," the girl said. Lena knelt down, smiling warmly. "And I always keep my promises." At the center, Lena moved from one person to another with quiet patience. A worried mother, a struggling student, an elderly man who just needed someone to talk to, she gave each of them her full attention, as if nothing else mattered. Her friend Maya watched her from across the room, shaking her head with a soft laugh. "You really think you can fix the whole world, don't you?" Lena shrugged gently. "Not the whole world, just someone's world, one day at a time." She didn't have luxury. No expensive clothes. No powerful connections. No one waited for her at the top of some shining tower. But she had something rare, something real. As the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Lena stood outside, watching quietly, her heart at ease. In a world chasing everything, she needed very little. She had nothing, but she had a heart. The city moved fast, as it always did, cars rushing, people glued to their phones, lives colliding without meaning. Adrian Kim stepped out of his black car, his assistant already speaking behind him about schedules and numbers, but his attention was elsewhere. He adjusted his cuff, eyes sharp, mind calculated, until it happened. A sudden impact. Coffee spilled across his perfectly tailored suit. I'm so sorry, a soft voice said quickly. Adrian looked down. And for a moment, everything stopped. She stood there, holding an empty paper cup, eyes wide with genuine panic. Lena. Not polished. Not rehearsed. Just real. His assistant stepped forward immediately. Do you have any idea who? Adrian raised his hand slightly. Silence. Lena grabbed a few tissues from her bag, stepping closer without hesitation. Please, let me fix this. I didn't see you, I was in a hurry. She started dabbing at his sleeve carefully, completely unaware of the man she was touching. Adrian didn't move. Didn't stop her. Didn't speak. He just watched. No fear in her eyes. No recognition. No performance. Just honesty. It's okay, she said softly, still focused on cleaning the stain. It'll come off if you wash it quickly. His assistant looked confused. Everyone else would have apologized from a distance. Some would have frozen. Others would have tried to impress him. But not her. Adrian finally spoke, his voice calm but quieter than usual. You're not going to ask who I am. Lena looked up, slightly surprised. Should I? A pause. For the first time in years. Adrian didn't have an answer. She stepped back, giving a small, apologetic smile. Again, I'm really sorry. I hope your day gets better. And just like that, she turned and walked away. No second glance. No curiosity. Adrian stood there, untouched by everything around him, except her absence. For the first time, his assistant began carefully, someone didn't react. Adrian's eyes followed the direction she had. Disappeared. His voice was almost a whisper. For the first time, someone didn't see my power. And somehow. That was the most powerful thing he had ever felt. The city never slowed down, but inside Adrian Kim's world, something had shifted. He sat alone in his glass-walled office that night, lights of the skyline reflecting in his eyes. Papers were open on the desk. A contract worth millions waited for his approval. His phone vibrated twice. Messages. Calls. Urgent decisions. But he didn't touch any of it. Instead, his mind kept going back to one moment. Coffee spilling. Her voice. Her eyes. No fear. His assistant, Daniel, stood nearby hesitating. Sir, should I reschedule tomorrow's meeting with the investors? Adrian didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, find her. Daniel blinked. Find who? Adrian's gaze stayed fixed on the city outside. The girl from this morning. A pause. That's not enough information, sir. We don't even know her name. For the first time, Adrian's expression tightened slightly, not in anger, but something worse, impatience. She was at the junction near Ian Street Cafe, he said calmly. Coffee. White shirt. She works somewhere nearby. Daniel hesitated again. We can run traffic footage, but it may take. Do it. One word. Final. Certain. Daniel nodded quickly and left the room. Silence returned. But it wasn't peaceful anymore. Adrian leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He tried to focus on numbers. On strategy. On control. But her face kept interrupting his thoughts. Not like a memory. Like a presence. Uninvited. Unshakable. He opened the contract again, scanned a line, then stopped halfway. His finger paused on the page. What is this? He murmured under his breath. It wasn't frustration. It was unfamiliarity. That was the problem. He had controlled everything in his life, markets, people, outcomes. Every variable accounted for. Every risk eliminated. But her. She didn't fit anywhere. Daniel returned later, cautious. We checked the cameras. She left the area on foot. No clear identification yet, but we're narrowing it down. Adrian nodded once. Then stood. I don't need narrowing, he said calmly. Daniel looked up. Sir. Adrian walked toward the window, eyes sharp but distant. I just need her. A beat of silence. Even Daniel felt it, something different in his boss. Not command. Not ambition. Something deeper. Dangerous. As the night stretched on, Adrian remained by the glass, watching a city that suddenly felt too small. She wasn't a choice, he said quietly. His reflection stared back at him, controlled, powerful, untouchable. She was a distraction he couldn't remove. It wasn't planned. Adrian didn't believe in chance. Everything in his life was scheduled, calculated, controlled. But when he walked into the small community center that afternoon, something in him already knew, this was not coincidence. Lena was there. She was helping an elderly man fill out a form, her voice soft, patient. No urgency. No pressure. Just calm understanding. Adrian stopped at the door. For the first time in a long time, he didn't immediately move forward. Lena looked up and noticed him. A brief pause. Then a polite smile. You again, she said simply, as if seeing a stranger twice in a big city was normal. Adrian stepped in slowly. You remember me? You're hard to forget, she replied lightly, then turned back to the man she was helping. Just sign here, uncle. I'll handle the rest. No hesitation. No curiosity about who Adrian was. That alone unsettled him again. Minutes passed. Lena finished her task and finally faced him properly. Are you lost? She asked gently. Adrian almost smiled, but didn't. No. Then you came here on purpose, she said. A simple observation. Not fear. Not excitement. Just truth. He nodded once. I did. Lena tilted her head slightly. Why? Silence. For Adrian, silence was usually a weapon. A way to control conversations. To make people uncomfortable. To dominate space. But with her, it didn't work. I wanted to see you again, he said finally. Lena didn't react the way others would. No surprise. No flattery. Just a soft, thoughtful look. That's not a very normal reason, she said. I'm not a normal man, he replied. That made her smile faintly. I can tell. They walked outside together. The late afternoon light softened everything around them. The city noise felt distant here. Lena carried a small stack of papers, Adrian walked beside her without his usual guards or assistants. It felt unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. You always help people like this? He asked. Most of them don't. Have anyone else, she said simply. So I become that person for a while. And you don't get tired? She shrugged. Sometimes. But people are not problems to fix. They're just, people. Adrian looked at her longer than he intended. In his world, everything was a problem. Everything had a solution. Everything had control. But she didn't think like that. And somehow, that made him quieter inside. They stopped near a small tea stall. Lena ordered 2 cups without asking him. Then handed one to him like it was normal. Adrian stared at it for a moment before taking it. You don't even know me, he said. Lena sipped her tea. I know enough. That's dangerous. She looked at him. No. That's human. Something shifted in him then. Small. Unnoticed by the world, but loud inside him. For the first time in years, Adrian didn't think about deals, power, or outcomes. He just stood there, present. And in that moment, he realized something he couldn't explain. With her, he didn't need control. The city lights blurred through the tall glass windows of Adrian's penthouse, but he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at something far away, something buried deep inside him. A memory. And like always, it came without warning. The boardroom from years ago. A younger Adrian stood at the head of the table, confident, sharp, trusting. Across from him sat people he once called family. His father. His uncle. Senior partners. The people who built the empire with him. You did well, Adrian, his father had said, smiling proudly. We're expanding faster than ever. Adrian had believed him. For the first time in his life, he had let his guard down. I couldn't have done it without you, young Adrian replied. His uncle raised a glass. To family. Glasses clinked. Smiles. Trust. Then silence. The memory shifted. Documents on the table. Empty signatures. Transferred assets. Numbers disappearing. Control slipping. You said this was temporary restructuring, Adrian said sharply, confusion turning into disbelief. His father didn't meet his eyes. It was necessary, his uncle replied calmly. Necessary for what? Adrian asked, voice rising. A pause. Then the truth dropped like a blade. For us to take what is ours. Silence shattered everything. Adrian stood still. I built this. His father finally looked at him, but there was no warmth left. Only calculation. You built it for us, he said. Back in the present, Adrian exhaled slowly. The memory always ended the same way. Loss. Betrayal. Emptiness. He poured himself a drink but didn't take a sip. Just held the glass tightly, as if control could still be found in pressure. His assistant Daniel stood near the door, unsure whether to speak. Sir, you haven't slept properly in days. Adrian didn't look at him. You get used to it, he said quietly. Daniel hesitated. About the girl. A sharp pause. Adrian's expression didn't change, but the air did. Leave her out of this, he said. Coldly. Daniel stepped back immediately. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't calm. It was guarded. Heavy. Adrian walked toward the window again, staring at the endless city below. The last time he trusted someone, he whispered to himself, voice almost lost in the glass reflection. He lost everything. His grip tightened. That was why he controlled everything. That was why he never let people close. And that was exactly why Lena was becoming dangerous. The rain fell softly over the city, but inside Lena's world, everything felt louder than thunder. She stood in front of a glass office building, holding a folder in her hands. Her fingers were shaking slightly, not from cold, but from what she had just seen. Documents. Emails. Records. His name. Adrian Kim. And a transaction trail that didn't make sense. A voice behind her spoke calmly. I told you he wasn't what you think he is. Lena turned slowly. A well-dressed man stood there, someone she recognized from the community center event weeks ago. A donor. A businessman. Someone who always smiled too much. He uses people, Lena, the man continued. Projects. Assets. Temporary interests. Lena's voice was low. Why are you showing me this? He sighed. Because you deserve the truth. Inside Adrian's office, the atmosphere was cold as usual. He stood by the window, phone in hand, speaking in a controlled tone. "Cancel the logistics deal. I don't care about the loss." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, Lena is here." That name paused the world for a fraction of a second. "Let her in," Adrian said. Lena entered the room slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Adrian noticed immediately, her silence was different today. He could feel it. "What is it?" he asked calmly. She stepped forward, placing the folder on his desk. "It's this," she said. He didn't look at it right away. "Explain." Lena's voice trembled slightly, but she forced it steady. "I trusted you." Adrian finally opened the folder. His eyes scanned it once. Then again. His expression changed, but only slightly. "This is incomplete," he said. Lena let out a short, painful laugh. "That's it? That's your answer?" He looked at her now. "What do you want me to say?" "That it's not true," she said quickly. "That you didn't use your influence. That I wasn't just—" She stopped, breath catching. A silence fell. Heavy. Sharp. Lena's eyes filled but didn't break. "You were in my world. For a reason," she whispered. "Right?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. That silence destroyed something between them. She took a step back. "You were just another deal to me, right?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Adrian's jaw tightened, but still, he said nothing. And that was worse than any explanation. Lena looked at him one last time. Not with love. Not with anger. But with disappointment. Then she turned and walked out. The door closed softly behind her. And for the first time, Adrian didn't try to control what he lost. The hallway outside Adrian's office felt longer than usual. Lena walked through it slowly, each step heavier than the last. The building was silent, but her mind was not. Every memory replayed at once, the coffee spill, the conversations, the moments that felt real. But now, they felt like a mistake. Behind her, the glass door of his office stood open. Adrian was still inside. He hadn't stopped her. That was what hurt the most. Lena reached the elevator and pressed the button. Her hand trembled slightly. She exhaled, trying to steady herself. "Just say something, anything," she whispered under her breath, not sure if she meant him or herself. But the hallway stayed silent. The elevator arrived. Doors opened. And she stepped in. Inside the office, Adrian stood completely still. The folder still lay open on his desk. The words blurred in front of him, but he wasn't reading them anymore. He was listening. To her footsteps. Slower. Fading. Leaving. Daniel, his assistant, stood near the entrance, uncertain. "Sir, should I?" "Leave it," Adrian interrupted quietly. Daniel hesitated. "But she's—" "I said leave it." His voice was calm. Too calm. Daniel nodded and stepped back. The door closed. Adrian walked to the window. Below him, the city moved as always. Cars. Lights. People. Life continuing without pause. But inside him, everything had stopped. He should have fixed it. Explained. Controlled it. That's what he always did. But for the first time in his life, he didn't know how. His reflection stared back at him, perfect, composed, powerful. And empty. He remembered her face. "You were just another deal to me, right?" No answer had left his mouth. And that silence, replayed louder than anything else. Downstairs, Lena stepped out of the building into the rain. It wasn't heavy, just enough to blur the edges of everything. She didn't look back. Not once. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She didn't check it. She just kept walking. Each step felt like removing a piece of something she didn't want to lose, but already had. Back upstairs, Adrian finally moved. Slowly. Almost mechanically. He picked up the folder again, then stopped. And let it fall back onto the desk. For the first time, control meant nothing. Because he could control empires. He could control people. He could control outcomes. But he couldn't control this. The absence. The silence she left behind. And as the city lights flickered against the glass, one truth settled inside him, heavy, undeniable, irreversible. He had everything, except the one person who mattered. The city looked the same. But Adrian Kim didn't. Months had passed, maybe longer. Time no longer mattered the way it used to. Everything blurred into meetings, flights, signatures, and numbers that grew larger every day. His empire expanded across continents. New offices. New deals. New records broken. On paper, he had become more powerful than ever. But inside his penthouse, everything felt unchanged. Still cold. Still silent. Still empty. Adrian stood by the glass window again, just like before. The skyline stretched endlessly in front of him, glowing like a crown he no longer felt worthy of wearing. Behind him, his assistant Daniel entered carefully. "Sir, the merger with the European group is finalized," he said. "It's your biggest achievement yet." A pause. Adrian didn't turn. "Good," he replied quietly. Daniel hesitated. "There's also the charity project in her district. We've expanded it exactly as you ordered." At that moment, something flickered in Adrian's expression. But only for a second. "Cancel my involvement in future decisions," he said. Daniel frowned slightly. "Sir." Adrian finally turned, his face calm, but distant. "I said I don't need updates," he repeated. Daniel nodded slowly and left. The door closed. Silence returned. Adrian walked to his desk. It was clean, organized, perfect. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. Except one thing. He opened a drawer. Inside, nothing personal. Just documents. Reports. Contracts. No photos. No memories. He had removed everything that reminded him of her long ago. But removing objects didn't remove absence. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing briefly. And for the first time in years, he allowed the thought to surface. Lena. Not as a memory of pain. But as a question that never left. Where was she now? Was she happy? Did she hate him? Did she even think of him at all? He didn't know. And that uncertainty was louder than any deal he had ever closed. Daniel returned later, more cautious this time. "Sir, you've been working non-stop. You haven't taken a break in months." Adrian opened his eyes slowly. "Breaks are for people who can afford weakness." Daniel hesitated. "And you, sir?" A long silence followed. Then Adrian said quietly, "I don't have that luxury." He stood and walked back to the window. The city below glittered like it always did, alive, moving, indifferent. He had everything now. Power. Control. Success. But none of it felt like victory. Because the only thing he ever lost was not something money could rebuild. And as he stood there alone, the truth finally settled inside him without resistance. His empire grew. But his world collapsed. The charity gala was supposed to be just another appearance. Adrian Kim stood at the center of the grand hall, surrounded by politicians, CEOs, and media flashes. Everyone smiled at him. Everyone wanted a piece of his attention. He gave none of it away. His expression was calm, controlled, exactly as always. But something felt different tonight. He didn't know what. Daniel leaned closer. "Sir, you're scheduled to speak in 10 minutes. Adrian nodded once. "Fine." He adjusted his cufflinks and turned slightly. And stopped. Across the hall. Time didn't slow. It disappeared. Lena stood near the far end of the room. But she was not the Lena he remembered. Gone was the softness. The hesitation. The quiet warmth. She stood tall now, composed, distant, powerful in a way that didn't need attention to exist. Her hair was tied back neatly. Her expression was calm, unreadable. Like someone who had survived something and decided never to be the same again. Adrian didn't move. Neither did she. For a moment, the world between them collapsed into silence. Then Lena looked at him. Just once. No shock. No anger. Just recognition. And something colder underneath it. She turned away immediately and spoke to someone beside her, as if he was no longer important. That hurt more than absence. Adrian moved through the crowd without realizing it. Daniel called his name once, but he didn't respond. He stopped a few steps behind her. "Lena," he said quietly. She didn't turn right away. When she did, her eyes met his, steady, controlled. "Yes," she said. Just that. No emotion. No crack in her voice. Adrian studied her face. "I didn't expect to see you here." A faint pause. "I work here," she replied simply. Another silence. He searched for something in her expression, anger, pain, anything familiar. But there was nothing left for him to recognize. "You changed," he said quietly. Lena tilted her head slightly. "So did you." That hit harder than it should have. Adrian took a small step forward. "We should talk." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Some stories don't end," she said softly. A pause. They wait. And in that moment, Adrian understood. This wasn't a reunion. It was something else. Something unfinished. Something that had survived time, success, silence, and pain. Lena turned slightly as if preparing to leave again. But neither of them moved yet. Because fate didn't bring them back to heal what was broken. It brought them back to face what was never resolved. The quiet cafe was almost empty. No boardrooms. No cameras. No audience. Just two people sitting across from each other, carrying everything they had never said. Lena held her cup without drinking. Her posture was calm, but her eyes were guarded. She was not the same woman Adrian once knew. Something in her had been rebuilt, stronger, sharper, harder to reach. Adrian noticed it immediately. And for once, he didn't try to control the space between them. He simply said, "I read everything." Lena didn't respond. He continued, voice low. "The documents. The report. The misunderstanding, it wasn't what it looked like." A small pause. "I never used you," he said. Silence stretched. Lena finally looked at him. "Then why didn't you say anything?" That question landed harder than any accusation. Adrian lowered his gaze for a moment. For the first time, he didn't have a perfect answer ready. "I thought," he stopped. Then exhaled slowly. "I thought it would be easier if you hated me." Lena's expression tightened slightly. "Easier for who?" A long silence followed. Adrian leaned back, running a hand over his face, something he never did in public, never in business, never in control. "For me," he admitted quietly. That honesty changed the air. Lena's eyes softened just a fraction, but she didn't break. Adrian continued, voice more fragile now. I've spent my entire life controlling outcomes. People. Risks. Emotions. He looked at her directly. But you, his voice lowered, you were never something I could control. Lena said nothing. So he kept going. I let you believe the worst version of me, he said. Because I was afraid that if you saw the real one, you would still leave. His hands tightened slightly on the table. I didn't lose you, he whispered. A pause. I let you go, because I was afraid. Silence. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was exposed. Lena looked down at her cup. Her grip loosened slightly. You should have told me, she. Told me, she said quietly. I know, Adrian replied immediately. No defense. No justification. Just truth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them still existed, but it no longer felt like anger. It felt like understanding trying to form again. Lena finally looked at him fully. Not the CEO. Not the powerful man. Just Adrian. And for the first time, she saw something she had never seen before. Not control. Not arrogance. Just a man who had been afraid to lose her, and lost her anyway.